All right, well, welcome back and welcome to Lesson 9.3. We're going to continue with our study of geometry, and tonight's lesson is going to be talking about classifying polygons. And my friend Ben is here, and he's back, and he's going to be helping us get through a lot of vocabulary tonight. So let's go ahead and get started, Ben. Let's start with what a polygon is. So what's the definition of a polygon?
It's a closed plane figure with at least 3 sides.
Okay, speak up so everybody can hear you.
A closed plane figure with at least 3 sides.
Okay, that's exactly right. It is a closed plane figure with at least 3 sides. And the sides have to be segments. Another definition that you might have seen if you were with me last year in Course 1 is a polygon is a figure that you get by combining segments, at least 3 segments, such that each segment meets exactly 2 others at each of its endpoints. Okay, and it has to be close. So you can't have things like this. That's not a polygon. You can't have squiggly things like that. That's not polygon because it's got to be made out of segments. And you also can't have things like this. Okay, where you have segments crossing in lots of places. Now they can have dents. So this would be a polygon. Okay, this is a polygon. Okay, this is a polygon. Okay, they have to be closed figures made out of segments, and that got a little round right there, but there we go. Okay, so the bottom part are polygons because they're closed figures made out of segments that kind of go around. Each segment touches 2 other segments at each of its endpoints. We don't have any crisscrossing stuff, we don't have any curves, and we don't have any open spots. So that's what a polygon is. Alright, so let's talk about the most basic kind of polygon. Now, Ben just told you that a polygon has to have at least 3 sides. So let's start out with the most basic polygon, which is a triangle. Okay? Alright, now triangles are nothing more than polygons with 3 sides. And we can classify polygons in 2 different ways. We can classify them by their angles, and we can classify them by their sides. It's kind of like all of us have a first name and a last name. Triangles are like that too. All right, now the angles, what we do when we look at the angles is we look at the biggest angle. Okay? If the biggest angle is obtuse in the triangle, then we call it an obtuse triangle. And that's the symbol for triangle. Okay? If the biggest angle is a right angle, then we call it a right triangle. And if the biggest angle, so those 2 small angles are always acute, but if the biggest angle is also still acute, then we call it an acute triangle. Okay, and so that's going to be based on just its angles. It doesn't matter what the sides are doing. All triangles are either obtuse, right, or acute. They're one of the 3. Okay, when we classify by sides, if all the sides are equal, then we call it an equilateral triangle. Okay, lateral. Okay, if at least 2 of the sides are equal, and I said that right, so listen carefully. If at least 2 of the sides are equal, then it's isosceles. Okay, and if none of the sides are equal, then we call it scalene. Now, there is an interesting relationship here between isosceles and equilateral. Since an isosceles is at least 2 equal sides, an equilateral triangle is like a special version of an isosceles triangle, where not only do you already have 2 sides equal, but you make the 3rd side equal to the other 2. Okay, so all triangles can also have a name by their sides. They actually all do, and so they're all either equilateral triangles, isosceles triangles, or scalene triangles. Got it? Okay, so that is pretty much all you need to know about a triangle. The other neat thing about triangles, if you add up their angles, the angles in a triangle. So if I take the 3 angles of a triangle, I take this angle, and this angle, I add them all up, it always equals a sum of 180 degrees. Okay? Alright, that's triangles. Now, let's go to the next number of sides. Let's go to quadrilaterals. Okay, now quadrilaterals are the next step up from triangles. They're going to be polygons that have 4 sides. Okay, and the most general type of quadrilateral is just that. It's a quadrilateral. Okay, so you can have a quadrilateral that looks something like this. Okay, where none of the sides are equal. Maybe this side's a little bit longer, and this side's a little bit longer still, and this side's a little bit longer still. Okay, so that's a general quadrilateral. Okay, now we also have something called trapezoids. Okay, and in a trapezoid, you have exactly one pair of parallel lines, and that's called a trapezoid. Okay, now you can have 2 pairs of parallel lines like this, where both pairs of opposite sides are parallel, okay, like this side and this side are parallel, and the top and the bottom are parallel. That's called a parallelogram because it's got lots of parallel sides. So trapezoid, you have one pair of parallel sides. Okay, parallelogram, you have both pair or opposite sides are parallel. Okay, next you have a rectangle. A rectangle is a quadrilateral with 4 right angles. Okay, you see those all the time. They're most of the shape we see most often common. There's also a shape called a rhombus, which basically looks like a diamond, where all the sides are equal. And that's called a rhombus. It's a special kind of parallelogram. So if all the sides are equal, you get a rhombus. If all the angles are equal, you get these little squares in the corners, you get a rectangle. Now, if it's both a rectangle and a rhombus, then we get one that we're very familiar with. We get a square. So squares are kind of cool because squares have all right angles, so they're rectangles, but they also have all sides equal sides, all congruent sides, so they're also rhombuses. Okay? Okay, so again, we have general quadrilaterals. I'll just put quad up here. We've got trapezoids, we've got parallelograms, we've got rhombuses, or rhombi, we have squares, and we have rectangles. Okay? Those are all quadrilaterals, and this time, if I add up the angles, the sum of all the angles on the inside, look at especially the rectangle and the square. I think you can tell that the sum of the angles, if you have 4 90-degree angles, the sum of the angles is going to be 360 degrees. Okay, so where a triangle is 180, a quadrilateral is twice that. Now, beyond quadrilaterals, what we're going to do is we're going to name different polygons by the number of sides. So starting at 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. The ones you really need to know what 5, you need to know 6, you need to know 8, and you should really know 10. Okay? And the names for these, you know most of these. The big building in Washington, D.C. that has all of the military stuff is called the Pentagon, because if you look at it from the top, that's exactly the shape. Something with 6 sides is a hexagon. You see this a lot on old-fashioned tile floors, especially in like restaurants. Italian restaurants have them a lot. Sometimes you'll see them in churches, lobbies, things like that. Now, one you don't see very often, I'm going to put it in blue. 7 sides is called a heptagon. It's almost like September, but instead of an S, it has an H. Heptagon. Okay, now 8 sides you see all the time. It's a stop sign. It's called an octagon. Okay, 9 is one you don't really need to know very much, but it's called a nonagon. And 10 is a good one to know. 10 is called a decagon. And we see that prefix all the time, DEC. We have a decimal-based number system. If you do work with metric system, you work in the decimals. 10 years is called a decade. So there's a lot of times that we use DEC, that prefix, to mean 10. And so a decagon has 10 sides. After that, there are names for a lot of them. But if somebody says, I've got a 14-sided polygon, okay, and you don't know the name, you can also get away. The black ones up above, you really have to use the formal name. But if you don't know the name, you can just put 14, the number 14, hyphen, and then gon. While it's not the best name, in a pinch, it'll work. Okay, on a test, that will lose you points. So if I say, what's the common shape you see that means to bring your car to a stop, and you say 8 gon, like this, okay, that's not technically wrong, but it's not as good a name as octagon. Okay? Make sense? All right. In an effort to keep the length of this video, because we're just getting back from break, keep this really short. I know that's a lot of vocabulary, so again, reviewing, there's 3 names. There's 3 different names for, so triangles have 2 names, and for each, there's 3 different choices. I almost said that backwards. Okay? So for angles, you look at the biggest angle, and you label the triangle as acute, right, or obtuse. For sides, you just look at how many sides are equal, and that'll tell you if it's a scalene triangle, if it's an isosceles triangle, and if it's isosceles, it might even be equilateral if the third side is equal also. Okay? Make sure you know your different kinds of quadrilaterals. Okay, we'll talk more about those, and they're in your book. And then again, the 5 up here, or the 4 up here, I'll circle them in yellow. The 4 up here, you really should know for the other polygons. So thanks for watching, and we're going to sign out right now.